What's going on, everybody? Welcome to After Prison Show, and in this video I want to tell you about an 18-year-old girl who just got sentenced to 13 years in prison. In fact, she just received this prison sentence 2 days after her 18th birthday, and I gotta tell you, that's a pretty fucked up 18th birthday present to receive. But with what she did, I can certainly understand why she's going to be spending the next 13 years of her life locked up in a penitentiary. And with all of this being mentioned thus far, what do you say we just go ahead and dive head first into this video? So let me go ahead and introduce you to 18-year-old Helena Jane Almario. We're just 2 days after her 18th birthday. She received a 13-year prison sentence for pimping and also human trafficking. Now, these charges actually stem from when she was a juvenile. She was arrested either last year or the year before last on these charges and sat in a juvenile facility awaiting her trial for these charges. And to think that a girl probably 16 or 17 years old is out there pimping other girls and also doing what is considered human trafficking, I mean, that's just unbelievable to me. Now, the girls that this Helena Jane Almario is accused of pimping and also human trafficking, I'm not really sure if I'm saying that correctly, but these girls that she is accused of doing this with range in the age of between like 14 and 15 years old. And I guess that she would meet these girls on social media, whether like on Facebook or other things like that, and then convince these girls of low self-esteem or whatever these girls must have been, these little girls, that engaging in prostitution was somehow the right thing to do. And once she would convince these young girls of just that, then she would then be driving them to the different locations to do only God knows what. And one of the things that's so crazy to me about this is the fact that this Helena Jane Almario, well, she was just a minor her damn self. So that gets me to wondering, like, automatically, if there was actually somebody above this young girl who was actually putting her up to doing this and orchestrating this and basically like running this prostitution ring. And in my mind, that makes perfect sense because I don't understand why a 16 or 17-year-old girl would be doing this. But then again, it is 2017 and nothing at this point really does surprise me. But I also would not be surprised if there actually was somebody, some older person who actually had this Helena Jane Almario basically running the show on this prostitution ring. But the story that I read mentions nothing of the sort, and it's now this Helena Jane Almario who is going to serve these 13 years in prison for pimping and also human trafficking. Which, might I add to all of this, these charges that she's now serving this time for have actually turned her into a sex offender, which means that when she comes home from prison, she will have to register and live her life as such. Now, where this took place at was in the state of California. And had this happened in Virginia, because I really don't know how much time she has to serve on these 13 years there in California, but had this happened in the good old state of Virginia where After Prison Show is located, she would have to serve at least 85% of that 13 years, which comes out to just a little more than 11 years. And if in California things are the same as they are here in Virginia, well, then that would mean at the very earliest she could be released, she would be like 29 years old. Still a relatively young girl who will go on to live the rest of her life as a fucking sex offender. Now, with me telling you this story, there's a couple of questions that I have for all of you out there, and one of them is, what do you think of this sentence that she received? Do you feel that this 13-year sentence she will serve, do you feel that's adequate for the charges that she has? And I mean, think of the entire situation overall. This girl was just a minor herself when she did this. Think about the fact that maybe there was somebody who was influencing this young girl to do this. Or then again, maybe there wasn't and she was just doing this entirely on her own. I really do want to know what all of you think about this story, so I hope you'll comment down below letting me know just that. There is one more story I want to tell you about in this video, and when I first read the title for this story, I completely got the wrong idea. And you'll understand that why when I tell you what the title of this story was. Texas prison pigs get cool climate, inmates get unbearably hot. Now, when I first ran across this story, I had no idea what to even make of this, and the first thing that came to my mind was, Texas prison pigs? Are they talking about the prison guards? But after reading this story, I realized they were not in fact talking about the prison guards. They were actually talking about real live prison pigs. Animals in prison. And what this story actually pertains to is just how hot it gets inside of prisons that don't have air conditioning. And I have to tell you that there are a lot of prisons across this country that don't have air conditioning. And I know some of you may be thinking, so what? These guys are in prison. Do they even really deserve air conditioning? But I have to assure you, I'm going to tell you from my own personal experience. When I first went to prison and got to a prison called Mecklenburg, this was one of those such prisons that did not have air conditioning. And I arrived at this prison right at the beginning of summertime during a year that was absolutely miserably hot. And to be locked inside of a cell with no air conditioning, a little 6x10 cell, having to share that cell with another prisoner, and the only thing that you have in there is this window that you can open that is doing absolutely nothing but letting more stifling hot air inside that small confined space. Now, what this prison did offer was the ability for prisoners to be able to go to commissary and buy these little small clear plastic $25 fans. And these are the type of fans that would like sit on somebody's desk or something. I mean, really not doing much of anything at all. But what we would do with these fans in an effort to try to somehow stay cool inside of this cell was we would take these fans and place them on top of a little small trash can that was inside of every cell. And inside of that trash can, we would fill that trash can with ice that was kept in a cooler out there in the day room in the cell block. So you would have this trash can full of ice with this little plastic piece of shit $25 fan on top of it. And then we would place a towel over the back of the fan and also over the trash can. And though the relief from the heat was only temporary, meaning that once the ice melted, the relief was gone, but what we were actually able to do was make prison air conditioners. But with this story that I ran across about these Texas prison pigs versus prisoners getting unbearably hot, well, these prisoners down in Texas, their situation is a hell of a lot worse than what I just mentioned experiencing here in Virginia at this prison Mecklenburg. Because one, trying to compare the heat in Virginia versus the heat in Texas, I'm quite sure it gets a hell of a lot hotter down there in Texas. Two, these prisoners down there cannot buy these fans that I was just telling you about because they don't have electrical outlets inside of their cells. And three, since 1998, over 22 prisoners have died in a Texas prison due to how hot it gets in there. So with the fact that prisoners have been dying in these Texas prisons because they don't have air conditioning, there's been lawsuits that have been filed, and they just had an injunctional hearing in federal court. I really have no idea what an injunctional hearing is, but I guess this is where they were trying to figure out whether or not they should be putting AC in these Texas prisons. And here's where all of this gets even more crazy. You remember those Texas prison pigs I was talking about? Well, see, here in the state of Virginia, we've got what's called the Department of Corrections. Down in Texas, it's called the Texas Department of Criminal Justice. Now, with the DOC and the TDCJ, they have these procedures that they have to go by, these rules, these policies, and in either of these two states with these two different things, DOC, TDCJ, these are the guidelines for what these prisons are supposed to operate under. And part of the argument that was raised in this injunctional hearing was that the TDCJ has this climate control policy for hog barns. I'm guessing that's where they house the pigs at, in a prison. And what this climate control policy for hog barns is to ensure pig comfort. The pigs must not be kept in temperatures above 85 degrees. The pigs must live in a comfortable environment with ventilation. And animals shall never be handled or housed in a manner that does not provide these essentials. And a big part of the argument during this injunctional hearing was, well, why the hell can't humans receive those same essentials? If you're going to provide air conditioning for prison pigs, well, then why the hell wouldn't you provide the air conditioning for the prisoners as well? Well, there was prison administration during this hearing who argued against why. And they said that, the heat wasn't really a dire problem. Dire problem. That doesn't really sound like the best choice of words, considering that prisoners have been dying since 1998 in the state of Texas in these prisons that don't provide air conditioning. And mind you, these prison administrators who were arguing against air conditioning, well, they most certainly have air conditioning inside of their own offices and where they work in these prisons. So yeah, I guess for them, the heat really wouldn't be a dire problem at all. But they also went on to argue that just to install air conditioning at each one of these prisons would cost somewhere between $22 million and $120 million per prison. You know, I'm no HVAC mechanic, but those numbers just don't really add up in my mind. $22 million to $120 million per prison to install air conditioning? I'm not really thinking it's going to cost anywhere near that amount. And in fact, an expert for the plaintiff's side argued that it would not cost $22 million to $120 million per prison to install this. This expert said that it would probably cost somewhere around maybe $450,000 per prison to install this air conditioning. So, you know, when you got one person saying $450,000, that's $500,000. And then you have prison administrators saying, hey, it's going to cost $22 million to $120 million per prison. There's a lot of fluctuation between those estimates. And, you know, I really do wonder which one is more correct. Because if it is this guy who's saying that this might only cost around $500,000 per prison, well then what the fuck are these administrators planning to do with all of this extra money if that was the amount of money they were given to install air conditioning at these prisons? Or maybe they just wanted to throw out the most astronomical fucking number in an effort to make sure that air conditioning in these Texas prisons never fucking happens. Kind of really makes you wonder, at least it does for me, and I hope it does for you as well. And again, I want to hear what you guys have to say about this story as well. Do you think that prisons should have air conditioning? I mean, if they're giving air conditioning to animals, I don't really see why they wouldn't give air conditioning to the prisoners. And also, what do you think about the cost of all of this involved? Where one side says it would be $500,000 versus another side saying it's going to cost every dollar on the face of the planet. And I'm really curious to hear what you have to say about this. Hey, look, that's it. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did so, please leave a like and a comment letting me know exactly what you thought about it. As always, until next time, enjoy life, the free world, never take a moment for granted, and make the most of every day. Peace!